scene in Blazing Saddles towards the end where the entire cast...
Yeah, we were shooting Harvey Korman and bad guys escaping from Warner Brothers, escaping from the black...
When Blazing Saddles hit theaters in 1974, nobody expected it to break rules the way it did. A comedy packed with wild humor, sharp satire, and a cast that gave it everything, the film quickly became a box office hit. It pulled in millions, shocked critics, and earned its spot in history as one of Mel Brooks's boldest creations. But as fans have continued to rewatch this classic over the decades, some moments have stood out in new ways. From hilarious behind-the-scenes stories to surprising goofs hiding in plain sight, join us as we dig into the movie and its cast and uncover the major goofs fans missed. The wild comedy that changed Hollywood. Blazing Saddles came out in 1974, and it was nothing like people had seen before. Directed by Mel Brooks, the movie was a mix of Western action and outrageous comedy. It didn't just poke fun at the old Hollywood cowboy films, it tore them apart with satire and jokes that shocked audiences at the time. Critics didn't know what to make of it at first, but audiences loved it. The movie was a huge box office success, making millions and proving that people were ready for bold comedy. It even went on to earn 3 Academy Award nominations, showing that Hollywood itself couldn't ignore what Brooks had pulled off. Over the years, its reputation only grew stronger. The American Film Institute later ranked it number 6 on its list of the 100 funniest movies ever made. And in 2006, the Library of Congress added it to the National Film Registry, calling it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. But behind all the laughter and success, there were also wild stories, deliberate mistakes, and unexpected bloopers that still keep fans talking today. That's part of what makes Blazing Saddles a film people never get tired of revisiting. And the more you look, the more you realize how much chaos, risk, and creativity went into this comedy classic. A cast like no other. The movie had an incredible lineup of actors who brought the story to life. Cleavon Little played Sheriff Bart, the quick-witted hero at the center of it all. Gene Wilder starred as Jim, known as the Waco Kid, an alcoholic gunslinger who helps Bart win over the townsfolk. Slim Pickens appeared as Taggart, the bumbling but dangerous henchman, while Alex Karras played Mongo, the giant brute with a surprising soft side. David Huddleston joined the cast too, and of course Mel Brooks couldn't resist stepping in himself. Brooks played 2 roles, Governor William J. Lee Pedomain and a Native American chief who speaks Yiddish. He even dubbed lines for other background characters, proving he had his hands all over the project. Other regulars from Brooks' movies also showed up, like Madeline Kahn, Dom DeLuise, and Harvey Korman. Kahn, in particular, left a lasting mark as Lily von Stupp, a German seductress with a comedic twist. She became one of the most memorable parts of the film. Even bandleader Count Basie made a cameo, performing April in Paris in the middle of the Wild West. It was an example of the deliberate anachronisms Brooks threw in. Moments that made no sense historically but worked perfectly for comedy. The cast had such strong chemistry that even the most ridiculous scenes came to life. And yet, as strong as they were on camera, there were also stories behind the scenes about who almost got cast, and how some roles shifted because of real-life problems. That includes one of the biggest what-ifs in comedy history: what could have been. One of the most surprising stories about Blazing Saddles is that Richard Pryor almost starred as Sheriff Bart. At the time, Pryor was one of the most exciting and controversial comedians in America. He was also a close collaborator with Gene Wilder, and the two would go on to star together in 4 films between 1976 and 1991, including Silver Streak and Stir Crazy. If things had worked out differently, Blazing Saddles could have been their first big project together. Pryor even co-wrote the film's screenplay, along with Mel Brooks, Andrew Bergman, Norman Steinberg, and Alan Uger. But as Gene Wilder later explained during a talk in New York in 2013, Pryor lost out on the role because of his addiction issues. Despite his brilliant talent, the studio was nervous about putting him in the lead role at that time. So instead, the part went to Cleavon Little, who delivered a sharp, smart, and unforgettable performance as Bart. Fans today often wonder what the movie would have looked like with Pryor in the role. But in the end, it worked out. Little gave the film a unique edge, and Pryor still left his mark on the project as one of the writers. This behind-the-scenes almost moment shows how close the movie came to being a very different film. And yet, even with all the changes, the comedy remained fearless, chaotic, and full of energy. The twists in casting were just the beginning, because the story itself took viewers on a wild ride that no one expected. A story that broke the rules. The plot of Blazing Saddles is set in 1874 on the American frontier. It begins with the construction of a new railroad, which needs to be rerouted through the small town of Rock Ridge. That land would be worth millions, and a greedy attorney general named Hedley Lamar comes up with a scheme to drive the townspeople out. He sends his men to terrorize Rock Ridge, hoping to clear it for his own gain. To add insult to injury, he convinces the clueless governor to appoint Bart, a black railroad worker, as the town's new sheriff. His plan is simple. The townspeople will be so offended that chaos will follow, leaving him in control. But Bart is smarter than Lamar thinks. Even though the townsfolk are hostile at first, Bart uses his quick thinking and a little trick where he pretends to hold himself hostage to survive. With help from Jim, the Waco kid, Bart slowly begins to win over the community. Along the way, he defeats villains like Mongo, who turns out to be more thoughtful than anyone expected, and Lili von Stupp, who hilariously falls in love with him. As the story builds, Bart brings together the people of Rock Ridge with the railroad workers, showing them that they need each other to fight Lamar's army. The final battle is pure madness. There are fake towns, dynamite traps, and even a toll booth that the villains have to stop at to pay for exact change. Then, just when it couldn't get any wilder, the movie breaks the fourth wall. The fight crashes into another movie set, spills into a cafeteria, and eventually ends on the streets of Burbank. Lamar tries to run away by ducking into a theater showing Blazing Saddles itself, but Bart tracks him down and ends it with a single gunshot. The movie closes with Bart and Jim riding off, not into the sunset, but into a limousine. This strange and playful ending summed up everything about Blazing Saddles. It was outrageous, self-aware, and completely different from the Westerns audiences were used to. But did you know that the story of Blazing Saddles did not begin with Mel Brooks? It started with Andrew Bergman, who was only in his 20s at the time. The birth of a bold idea. Bergman came up with the original idea and called it Tex X, an homage to Malcolm X. I wrote a first draft called Tex X, he later explained, adding that the lead character was directly inspired by Malcolm. At one point, Alan Arkin was set to direct, and James Earl Jones was supposed to play the sheriff. But like so many early Hollywood plans, it fell apart. That's when Mel Brooks entered the picture. Bergman remembered saying, "I love Mel Brooks," when his name came up. Brooks agreed and told him he loved the idea too, but wanted to turn it into a Western. That was the start of something special. Brooks still struggled with the title, rejecting names like Black Bart and the Purple Sage. Then, like many creative breakthroughs, the perfect name came to him in the shower. Blazing Saddles was born. Brooks later told Playboy, "What grabbed me were the possibilities of a modern black man arriving in the traditional West." He pulled together a writing team that included Norman Steinberg, Alan Uger, and Richard Pryor. As Brooks put it, Pryor wrote the Jewish jokes, the Jews wrote the black jokes. 9 months later, we had a finished script. With a title in place and a team of writers ready, the film was set to make history. But as you'll see, those writers weren't exactly Hollywood's finest at the time. Writers on the edge. When Brooks began gathering his writers, most of them were not in demand. Norman Steinberg had no film credits, and Bergman had just failed to get a teaching job despite having a history PhD. Brooks himself admitted he felt washed up after the producers and the 12 Chairs failed to make money. "The producers and the 12 Chairs together didn't make me enough money to buy a new car," he later wrote in his memoir. Richard Pryor was also in a complicated spot. His career had taken a new direction, and he was embracing edgier material, inspired by the Black Panthers and radical politics in Berkeley. He was also battling a heavy cocaine habit. Even so, his imagination and raw humor helped shape the film. Scott Saul wrote in Becoming Richard Pryor that the writers were either untested or on the skids. That strange mix might have been the very thing that gave Blazing Saddles its fearless voice. Brooks himself admitted they weren't writing for everyone. He explained, "It was designed as an esoteric little picture. We wrote it for two weirdos in the balcony. For radicals, film nuts, guys who draw on the washroom wall, my kind of people." What started as a small idea quickly grew into something much bigger. But before the cameras rolled, Brooks tried to bring in the biggest cowboy star in Hollywood. The cast that almost was. Brooks wanted the Western legend John Wayne to appear in the movie. He asked Wayne to read the script, and the star actually enjoyed it. But Wayne worried about how the role might affect his career, so he politely declined. He did say, "I'll be the first one in line to see it." Even without Wayne, Brooks had an impressive cast, though getting them wasn't easy. The role of the Waco Kid was a struggle. Brooks first offered it to Johnny Carson, who turned it down. Then he hired screen veteran Gig Young. At first, Young seemed perfect for the role of a drunken gunslinger, but the actor was fighting real alcoholism. On the very first day of shooting, things went wrong. Brooks recalled, "We draped Gig Young's legs over and hung him upside down, and he started to talk and he started shaking. I said, 'This guy's giving me a lot. He is giving plenty. He's giving me the old alky shake. Great.' And then it got serious because the shaking never stopped, and green stuff started spewing out of his mouth and nose, and he started screaming. Young was rushed to the hospital, and Brooks admitted, 'I had no movie.' Fortunately, Gene Wilder stepped in. He already knew most of the kid's lines, and he gave a brilliant performance that turned into one of his most iconic roles. Slim Pickens also gave his all, even sleeping outside with a rifle to get into character. And then there was Alex Karras, a former NFL player who played the hulking Mongo. His famous scene where he knocks out a horse was actually inspired by a story Brooks once heard about comedian Sid Caesar doing the same thing. But the strangest casting story came even earlier, when Brooks was searching for his sheriff. Breaking ground and breaking wind. You see, Richard Pryor himself was once considered for the lead role of Sheriff Bart, but his personal struggles cost him the part, and it went instead to Cleveland Little, who gave the film its steady center. Even though Pryor wasn't the star, his writing helped shape the movie in ways that no one else could. And once the cameras rolled, Brooks wanted to make sure the movie stood apart from any Western before it. One of his boldest choices was to include the first ever scene with audible flatulence. Cowboys in old films were always shown eating beans by the campfire, but no one had ever shown what would realistically happen next. Brooks later joked, "Blazing Saddles, for me, was a film that truly broke ground. It also broke wind, and maybe that's why it broke ground." He didn't just include the sound, he made it louder to be sure the audience's laughter wouldn't drown it out. It was shocking, hilarious, and completely new. But the studio was not amused. Warner Brothers chairman Ted Ashley demanded cuts after a sneak preview. He wanted the racial slurs and the fart noises removed. Brooks said he ignored those orders. "When he left, I crumpled up all of my notes and threw the wad into a wastebasket. I didn't cut a sentence or a word or even an expression on anybody's face." That decision to stick with the outrageous material was part of what made Blazing Saddles stand out. It wasn't safe, it wasn't polished. It was bold and messy. And that risk created a movie that people are still talking about today. Richard Pryor's role behind the scenes. When people talk about Blazing Saddles, Richard Pryor's name always comes up. He was one of the credited writers, and his presence shaped the film in ways many fans don't realize. Pryor had some unusual demands before even joining the team. According to Becoming Richard Pryor, he wanted train fare and a bottle of brandy waiting for him in the writer's room. Once he arrived at Warner Brothers, he made himself at home in the 6th floor conference room. Mel Brooks started explaining how the film was changing from the original idea. While listening, Pryor calmly opened a locket, tipped out some cocaine, and snorted it right there. Brooks remembered Pryor even offering him some, to which Brooks replied, "Never before lunch." Despite his lifestyle, Pryor's creative input was vital. Andrew Bergman admitted, "If you have 3 Jews in a room, you're going to be very skittish about writing jokes about a black man. What's permissible, what isn't permissible?" Richie gave us license, which was an enormous gift. Brooks himself agreed. "I said, I can't say the N-word. I need him. He has to bless it. I need a black guy to bless that word." Pryor did just that, telling Brooks, "We are writing a story of racial prejudice. That's the word, the only word. It's profound, it's real, and the more we use it from the rednecks, the more the victory of the black sheriff will resonate." Beyond the subject of race, Pryor also added humor in other areas. He created lines for Mongo, the huge henchman played by Alex Karras, including the famous line, "Mongo only pawn in game of life." But while Pryor's writing shaped the movie, he never got to play the lead role of Black Bart. And that decision wasn't made by Brooks. It came from the studio. Young Frankenstein and Family Ties. While shooting Blazing Saddles, Wilder approached Brooks with an idea for a new film. His idea was very simple, Brooks later said. "What if the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein wanted nothing to do with the family whatsoever? He was ashamed of those wackos." I said, "That's funny." That idea grew into Young Frankenstein, which came out later the same year in December 1974 and became another massive success. Brooks' creative life was booming, but his personal life was also changing during this time. While writing Blazing Saddles, his son Max Brooks was born. Max would go on to become a writer himself, best known for works like World War Z. Brooks and his wife Anne Bancroft welcomed Max into their lives during the long writing process, proving that while Mel Brooks was building comedy history, he was also building his family. And the family element stretched into the cast as well. Madeline Kahn, after her success in Blazing Saddles, would go on to star in several more Brooks films, including Young Frankenstein. Her performance as Lily von Stupp didn't just earn her an Oscar nomination, it cemented her place in Brooks' creative circle. With so much talent, humor, and even family influence tied into the making of the movie, it's no surprise that its impact would stretch far beyond the box office. But Blazing Saddles didn't just succeed quietly. It faced serious resistance before it ever hit theaters, a comedy that almost never opened. Even with a finished film, the executives at Warner Brothers were nervous. When Brooks first screened Blazing Saddles for them, the response was underwhelming. He later recalled, "When we screened it for executives, there were few laughs. Some even said, 'It's simply too vulgar for the American people. Let's dump it and take a loss.' For a moment, it looked like the movie might never see the light of day. Fortunately, studio president John Calley took a gamble. He decided to release the movie in just 3 cities, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, as a test. To everyone's surprise, it exploded in popularity and quickly became the studio's top moneymaker of the summer. The film's legacy only grew from there. The American Film Institute ranked it number 6 on its list of the 100 funniest movies of all time. In 2006, the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry, recognizing its cultural and historical significance. Critics praised it too. Roger Ebert gave it a perfect 4 stars, calling it a crazed grab bag of a movie that does everything to keep us laughing except hit us over the head with a rubber chicken. He admitted its structure was messy, but added, "What does that matter when Alex Karras is knocking a horse cold with a right sock to the jaw?" Even politicians weighed in, with former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg calling it his favorite movie. There was even an attempt to spin it into a TV series in 1975 called Black Bart, though the pilot never made it to air. Speaking of which, Blazing Saddles is one of the funniest movies ever made, but even classics come with mistakes. Some are so small you might miss them the first time. Others are so clear you wonder how they stayed in. The goofs fans can't unsee. In the Rock Ridge Church scene before the dynamite comes crashing through the window, you can actually see the device used to break the glass. Later, when Hedley Lamar gets out of a cab at the Chinese theater, the street looks empty. But as the shot changes, a man suddenly appears on the side of the frame. Then there's Mongo's big entrance on a steer. The chain around his neck changes direction in a single cut, flipping from left to right without anyone touching it. These slips are small, but once you notice, they jump out every time. The same goes for Bart's conversation with Jim about shooting dynamite. 1 second, his hands are on his hips. The next shot shows them clasped around his belt buckle. Even the brawl scenes are full of continuity errors. Taggart pats Mongo on the back, pulls away, then somehow is still patting him in the next shot. In the cafeteria fight, Taggart ends up with food on his stomach. but when he slides away, the food has shifted to his chest. And when Mongo knocks down a man in a derby during Bart's farewell scene, the victim disappears altogether in the very next frame. The crowd is full again as if nothing happened. These little mistakes don't ruin the fun. They actually add charm. But they are only the start of the hidden bloopers waiting in this movie. The bloopers hidden in plain sight. One of the funniest parts of Blazing Saddles is how wild it looks, but some goofs are hard to ignore. In the fake town scene, a crook kicks down a building. Later, when dynamite goes off, the exact same building falls again as if it had been magically rebuilt. When Bart delivers the famous candygram to Mongo, his shadow shows up on the painted backdrop, making it obvious the street is a set. The horse-punching moment has its own slip too. Before Mongo's victim falls, his head is turned toward the horse. After the cut, his body faces the opposite way, proving a stunt double took over. Even early on, mistakes sneak in. When the two black workers ride the handcart, a cable pulling them into the quicksand is clearly visible for a second. Mongo's big escape from chains also reveals the trick. The shot stops, the chains are swapped for fake ones, and suddenly the water dripping from his face vanishes. Audio goofs are there too. When Taggart kicks a fake building, he shouts, "It's a fake! We've been suckered in!" But his mouth is wide open and doesn't match the words at all. Later, in the studio lot chaos, a tour guide's lips don't even come close to the lines we hear. Hedley Lamar's shooting scene also slips. The sound of a body hitting the ground plays a second before the actor even falls. Even Mongo's candygram gag has a mistake. He closes his eyes before the package explodes, a clear safety move that wasn't hidden well enough. Fans laugh at the errors now, but they keep the film alive in a different way. And if you think those are all the mistakes, wait until you see what happens in the final scenes. The mistakes that stick out. The chaos of Blazing Saddles gave fans so many laughs, but also plenty of continuity problems. In the Rock Ridge raid, a thug lassos a man and drags him through the mud. At first, the rope is around his feet, pulling him head first. Suddenly, it shifts to his chest and drags him in the opposite direction. When Mongo sniffs Taggart's arm, his hat keeps sliding. One shot shows it blocking his eyes, the next has it raised high, though Mongo's hands never move. Even Sheriff Bart's office scene isn't safe. The Waco kid is shaving with cream on his face. After wiping a little off, he jumps when Bart kicks a chair. But when the camera cuts, all the cream has vanished. At the end, the goofs keep coming. Waco kid lounges on hay bales with no horse in sight. But as soon as Bart invites him along, a horse magically appears. These errors show how fast the movie was shot and how hard it is to catch every detail. But even with the bloopers, the movie still shines. As Mel Brooks himself once said, "I love Some Like It Hot, but we have the funniest movie ever made." He believed no comedy topped Blazing Saddles, not even those ranked above it on the American Film Institute's list. Fans might argue over the list, but Brooks was never shy about where his film stood. And in fact, his work on this movie sparked another idea that became just as famous. From Saddles to Frankenstein. While filming, Brooks often saw Gene Wilder scribbling notes during breaks. Brooks remembered, "One day on the western town set of Blazing Saddles, when we broke for lunch, I noticed Gene Wilder leaning against the sheriff's office and scribbling something on a pad propped up on his knees. I said, 'Gene, how about lunch?' He said, 'In a minute, I have to finish a thought I have.'" Wilder then handed Brooks the pad. At the top were the words, "Young Frankenstein." Brooks loved it. Wilder explained the idea. What if the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein wanted nothing to do with the family? Brooks thought it was hilarious. Together, they started writing the script at night after filming Blazing Saddles. That's how both movies came out in the same year, 1974, giving audiences two comedy classics from the same team. Looking back, many critics agree that Blazing Saddles could not be made today. At the time, it mocked Western cliches, exposed racism, and pushed Hollywood's boundaries. In the 1970s, Westerns were changing. The old John Wayne era was fading, and new names like Eastwood were taking over. Brooks used satire to hit both the genre and the attitudes tied to it. The story of Bart, the black sheriff sent to Rock Ridge, hit harder because it came just 2 years after Wayne's The Cowboys, which still used racist language without irony. Brooks gave audiences something different. Humor that attacked prejudice while still making people laugh. It was a bold move that worked. And though people debate whether the movie would be accepted now, one thing is clear. Its mix of outrageous comedy, sharp satire, and yes, even its goofs, left a mark that can't be erased. What's your favorite Blazing Saddles blooper or behind-the-scenes story that makes you laugh every time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.